right, let's get started. Um, First of all, thank you to all the people who decide to sign up and to join us for this session. So my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. I'm the CEO, Chief Data Privacy Officer of and founder of Debbie Reynolds Consulting. I have alarms going off here. So the session we're going to be talking about today is privacy trust and the road ahead, strengthening organizations by reducing privacy risks. So this session really is going to be me, Lawrence, and Rob Andrews from Privacy and Cookies talking about just the general things that companies go through or individuals go through when they're thinking about privacy and how this impacts, probably the most popular way that individuals interact with technology as it relates to tracking, which is websites. So I'm actually going to stop sharing. So now I think people can see us, right? So yeah, so I would love for Lawrence Shaw and Rob Andrews to introduce themselves. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Oh, you going
So
first?
hello.
Go on.
So good morning, everybody. Yes, thank you, Debbie. Great to meet you all. Lawrence Shaw, founder of sort of a company called Privacy and Cookies. Really, yes, we've been doing sort of working in the sort of privacy sector since 2008, deploying various things like consent management platforms. Very recently moved into more of the sort of benchmarking and auditing of websites. And I can hand over to Rob to say hello.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks for coming, and yeah, great have Sonia on the call today, and thanks Debbie for getting this along. So I'm Rob Andrews, and I am the commercial director here at Privacy and Cookies. I'm a relative newbie to privacy, been involved for a couple of years now, but I got involved with Privacy and Cookies because I was working for an organization that was involved very much around the future of work. And I think some of the automation and solutions that Privacy and Cookies got are very relevant to that. And so that's my background, and that's why I'm here. And hopefully we'll talk a lot more about that as we move forward.
Great, thank you so much. Maybe I should just start out by talking about how we started and why we're doing this and why we decided to try to join forces and collaborate about this. So Rob actually contacted me on LinkedIn and he said, "Oh, I have some things I want to show you." And I was really blown away by the work that you all had really put in, and your focus on client or consumer or individual facing websites, and your deep knowledge there about tracking. And then at that time, you all had done the London Index and you were thinking about doing the Fortune 500. So when we were talking, I think you decided to do the Fortune 1000. So you sort of went away for a few months and worked on that. And so again, I was really happy to see, the index. I thought it really went really well. So I think it's a really cool tool. I like it a lot, and I'm happy that we're able to collaborate. I mean, if nothing else, I think it gets the conversation started about tracking, and it really helps people like me who are like data privacy officers or someone who's responsible for privacy or just want to know maybe there's something that you quickly want to get a gauge on for a client or for yourself. So the Fortune 1000 is just an example of what you can do with this type of tool. But then you also can go directly to the Rethink Privacy website and put in any website link that you want, right, to be able to get some information. So before we start, I want to do a couple of polls to get some information about the audience. So I'm going to launch one of these. Let's see what I can get going here. You all have to forgive me. I'm challenged here. So let's see. All right. Okay. So I wanted to try to find out from people what is their job function. And I'll just read out the results. So if people can start polling, that'd be great. I give you about 5 more seconds to see. Okay. So let's see. It looks like we're about 50-50. So 50% legal compliance, 50% legal compliance, or 40% legal compliance, 40% consulting, and the rest other. So that's great. That's good to know. So let's do, cool. So that's great. That's good to know for the audience. I want to do one more. Actually, I have 3 polls. I'm curious about the location of attendees. This would be interesting. So I just want to get a gauge of where people are joining from today. So it's a horse race here between North America and Europe. Have some people from Africa, actually. Very nice, very nice. A lot of Europe. That's from Lawrence and Rob, I'm sure. So we have about, I want to say 50% Europe, like 30% North America, and 17% Africa. That's great. That's great. Good to know. And then the last one will be your big privacy challenge. So here we go. I just threw out some things that I thought people, may be challenged with, just to get an idea. So I would love you guys to participate with this. Sweet. So it looks like in terms of challenges that people are having, it looks like, oh, there's a lot of other here. So this is a horse race between having tools to make your work easier. That's, I think that's 20%, managing notice and consent of individuals, and breaking down silos within organizations. And 40% is other. So I'm in this. Perfect. Okay, great. Okay, so that's some good information there, especially for the people who put other, what their privacy challenges are. If you all have any questions, definitely enter them into the Q&A. So as we're talking, throughout, I may be able to throw out some questions if you guys have them. But I had a couple questions that I wanted to ask Rob and Lawrence that we can kind of discuss. So what are the challenges that organizations are really having around managing risk for data privacy? What are you seeing?
Well, I think first of all, thanks, Debbie, on this. I think probably the big challenge we see is just kind of that, how do you quantify that risk, and how are you, the awareness of that risk? And that's one of the challenges we see. So, okay, when it comes to privacy, and obviously, cookies and tracking technologies that we specifically deal with, there's I guess there's this, you're compliant or non-compliant, but actually, I think that all organizations are always working towards that compliance, but how bad is the risk? And I think that's been the challenge today. And for DPOs and for organizations and boardrooms, etc., quantifying that has really been it's been a big challenge, which is obviously one of the reasons that we've sort of started to put together this index and the scoring system. Is there anything you want to add to that Lawrence? Are you?
There we go. I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I think really, organizations sort of need to know where they are. You can't manage risk if you don't know the sort of starting point. And also, organizations a lot of people have invested in technology and sort of started to do things about it. But the sophistication of some of the sort of big data aggregators, some of the sort of things that happen behind the scenes, without even the consent of the organization, let alone sort of collecting the consent of the individual, is really causing organizations sort of unexpected failure. despite all the efforts they're putting in, because the sophistication of the data collectors, data aggregators is considerable, shall we say. So lots of people have tried and done some work around it. But as you see, when we'll go on and do the index, there's some quite quantifiable serious issues that could help improve.
Yeah. So yeah, after we finish kind of the Q&A and talking sections, and I'll pepper in questions that people have, Lawrence is going to demonstrate the index. So I think that would be really cool. So Lawrence, I'm going to pose this to you first. How does trust impact businesses with data management? I know that we talk about fines a lot, and that gets talked about, right? But I think the customer trust is a huge issue, because, in my view, if customers can't trust the organizations, they're going to lose those customers, or they're not going to be able to get customers. So, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think trust is probably one of the most valuable commodities online these days, and it's so easy to lose it. I mean, maybe 10 years ago, we weren't really aware of the value of our data. And now we are. I think more and more people are aware of the value of their data, and also how organizations use the data. I mean, there's been a number of sort of TV programs, it's got featured in films and etc. How it can even impact presidential campaigns. I mean, none of us would like to have our sort of trust broken. But in privacy, I think there's been a lot of historic views, especially in certain sectors, where they had a right to the data, and sort of a lot of, we have the right to this data, we can take data, which is actually, is now sort of having quite negative connotations for those sort of brands, and most people, I don't think people have a problem with trusting the larger brands and sort of super brands, as long as there's transparency in what people are doing, and the way data is being collected, and also the way the data. I mean, we all know that if we go on a website, we search for a certain product, likelihood that advert's going to appear, for selling one of those products on another website. We know that happens, but it's potentially if an email arrives in your inbox the following day to say, oh, by the way, we've got a special offer on this product, and you think, where's that email? How do they get my details? And then the worst sort of, you think, well, hold on a minute, you've got my details, and then you have an option to subscribe, and you click the subscribe, and it doesn't work, or they don't unsubscribe you. And I think that's the thing that the organizations don't. You've only got one chance to get it right with people online. There's plenty of alternatives.
Right. What do you think, Rob?
Well, I trust. I think in all of our business relationships, that's obviously key to all of our interactions, and has been since since forever and a day. And yet there seems to have been, or has been a different attitude online, which I think Lawrence has alluded to, in the fact that our privacy may not have been respected in the way we'd expect in every other day, in every other aspect of the way our lives and we do business. And I think that is slowly changing, and I think that and it can't come fast enough. And I think there is definitely an appetite and an awareness within organizations that they need to do this, and trust being very, very important, particularly for consumer brands, etc. So I think they're becoming aware of it and want to and understand the value of trust. I think actually implementing and delivering against the promise, if you like, of respecting people's data is proving more challenging, and I think that's where the real threat lies for in trust moving forward. So I think there's a lot of work to be done still, even though I think attitudes are changing.
That's great. I just want to throw in here, Stephen Beckett made a comment where he says he agrees with this about the need to keep up with software, hardware, the importance of cybersecurity in relation to cookies and consent. As a business owner who's been delivering data privacy education for over 25 years, I believe the starting point has to be human education in terms of privacy by design, implementation, the ideology, into privacy education for employees and customers. I think that's important, right? Why do you all think, thank you for that, Steve, I appreciate that. He's a fan of us. uh, I know we're talking a lot about transparency, and transparency is really key, but I would love for you all to talk about why did you think it was important to create this privacy risk index for the Fortune 1000?
Shall I kick that one off? Yeah, I mean, I think the top of the shop for that one has to be, awareness of the issue, and I've kind of alluded to that before. And I think the index is a great way of showing that. It's, I don't think you're comparing necessarily against other organizations in your same sector, clearly, because there's an index for the Fortune 1000. But I think what it does show is that there's a lot of work to be done. And I think until the index being out there really helps people to focus attention on that. So I think that's really good from that perspective. And I think the other thing about the index, it's a real public way, by publishing the index, of demonstrating a commitment to the privacy and improvement. Because obviously the good thing about the index is the measure, if you like, your privacy respect score. So I think there's a real opportunity for organizations to demonstrate their commitment to this and their improvement over time. So that's really why we've done this.
Yeah, and then I'll point out too, the way the index works is that Lawrence and Rob are going to update this, I think, once a month, right? To be able to show progress over time. So if there's a company that's on the index, monthly, you'll be able to go and see, like, maybe they got better. Hopefully they didn't get worse. But sometimes that happens too. A lot of times it happens because companies are always looking to either improve their service or add on new services. So when they're adding on new services, and as people who are in like education or data privacy roles, technology or new technology, or whenever we bring on something new, it creates like a new wrinkle in everything. So it's like we have to start again at the starting line to be able to evaluate that, how it impacts your business. So that's interesting. So many people interact with businesses using websites. So explain why this is important and how that impacts privacy.
All right, do you want to say that one? Or?
Yeah, so I think when a lot of people interact with websites, right? So people just do whatever they want on the internet, but they may not be aware of things that happen behind the scenes when they're entering data on websites. So talk a little bit about that and how that impacts privacy, maybe in ways that people aren't thinking about.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I suppose that's the big challenge for everybody. Do they really know where their data's going and how their data's being used? I mean, an example is you could put your details into a website. If there's a lot of focus these days on sort of modern cars, the electric cars. You could put your data in. You could buy a new car with your sort of retail to your car dealer. That information could then be shared with the people who provide charging points, the people who provide the network of charging points, and then any number of sort of stations that operate. The big challenge, although the right to be forgotten and the sort of right to recall your data is there, we haven't really got to the point where your data has now been merged with 3 or 4 different organisations, and we call the privacy co-op, that are trying to sort of look at how we can actually have our data stored once. It sounds great. I met the guy a couple of weeks ago. Sounds a great idea of actually, you give access to your data. So because what you really need to know is how my data is being used. Honestly, how my data is being used, not what they want you to read. And then also, how if I don't want somebody else to have access to my data, how do I either prevent them to get access to their data, or how do I get it recalled? Because I think that's the challenge that we face. And that's the data you actually enter. But then behind the scenes, you've got all the sort of, I suppose, the data that's being collected about you, about where you go, what you do online. If you were doing, and I've seen this where somebody was doing research, sort of to do with buying a diamond ring as a special gift for a lady friend, shall we say, that she went onto the same computer the next day and then there was offers for more diamond rings, ruined the sort of engagement surprise, shall we say. But there's other challenges where, you know, you sort of might randomly search for, you might have seen this happen as well, where you search for sort of star sign Cancer. You know, you just want to know compatibility between Cancer and Sagittarius. Then that information's still stored, and then you get a letter from your insurance company because you also go into their website and say, you know, well, actually, do you know about cancer risk? We're going to put your premium up. I mean, complete misuse of data, but, you know, a completely accidental misuse, but still, you know, it's now on your record and you can't expunged that record. So I think, yeah, I think we're only just starting to understand the fact, you know, the real value, and then also, but the biggest challenge is protecting our data, and also, but also there's you know, the allowing the right organisations to make use of your data. You know, the sort of the original store cards and things like that, a great idea. You know, because if it knows you're going to run out of toilet roll, yeah, it's great if it can reorder the toilet roll for you, or ink for your pen, or batteries. You know, and it's the careful balance about what can make your life easier. What marketing people could use to their advantage, and then I suppose what says the other part, how easy it is to misuse data.
Yeah. So Lawrence, have a question for you about, you know, what are you seeing in terms of kind of future risks or future trends that maybe people aren't thinking about right now?
I think one of the biggest problems we're seeing is about actually the right to recall your data. I'm on a couple of committees in Europe. I've sort of also worked at the EU and things like that. But you know, the when your data's consolidated, so I'm going to say I've got an electric car. I gave my details to the car dealer. The car dealer gave my details to the energy transmission company. The energy transmission company who were planning where to put the power network then gave that data to the charge points. They then gave that to the petrol stations that offer charge points. Now my data's gone to 5 or 6 places. I don't want my data, really. I don't want the petrol companies to be sharing my data to send me offers when when the worst thing is actually, and you get offers and you can't even plug your car in at the petrol station. You know, it's the sort of it's that sort of thing that I think, you know, a lot of the data is gone now. A lot of the sort of the data collected, I mean, the sort of the mapping systems, the websites offer free mapping, which will tell you journey times, you know, data collection. So where do you work, where are you traveling, where do you live? I think some of the areas there. But I think, yeah, it's the ability to sort of own the future of it is really to own your data. And if you want to make it available for it to be monetized, how do you get a share of that monetization? So how do you get discounts on things? How do you get, you know, value for sharing your data? And then also, if you don't want your data shared, how do you protect yourself?
Right. And then the new thing is, you know, it's like a hot potato issue where people are like, well, it's not my responsibility. No, it's your responsibility. You know, so being able to tie that data to a real purpose that makes sense for the individual, I think is really important. Right. So what things have you been surprised about when you created this index? What surprising things came up for you?
People's reactions. I'd suggest the sort of, in some cases, sort of rather sort of negative reactions in terms of we've got all this in hand. Probably the biggest, not this, well, the level of velocity actually at doing the index, when I think people with digital tend to take it really personal. Digital's not seen as, now if something goes back to my car, if something goes wrong with my car, well, the Range Rover, so I will blame the dealer, but but if something goes wrong with your car, if you get a puncture, you don't blame the car dealer. Yeah, there's sort of a very much with digital, it's a very sort of personal thing. And I suppose the challenge is we're still in a sort of a market which is quite immature overall. And one of the challenges is, and we'll go into the sort of why we bought the index, but sort of supplier accountability. Now, the supplier said everything's okay. I want to believe the supplier, so I'm going to back up the supplier. our findings might not really tie with that. Because that's one of the challenges. Rob, over to you. Experienced some of these as well.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, yeah, some reactions, and I think you've just touched on it. Some sort of maybe defense, defending, if you like, their own the positions, and and we know it's difficult within organisations. You cross one of the polls and the surveys earlier, looking at different departmental interests, etc. And I think that, I mean, overall, I mean, but to the initial question, it surprised me, I guess, is that organizations, some of the organizations they're are okay, they're not, they've got a lot of work to do, shall we say, and an awful lot of them have. So around about 90% of the organizations have got quite a lot of work to do. So I guess in that way that's quite surprising. And then even I think there's kind of a perception, I think, in the marketplace. You put on a consent management platform, etc., and then that's going to be potentially your answer. And I think that's what Lawrence is alluding to there about suppliers, one of the suppliers anyway. And actually things get worse rather than better. And maybe I can't say I was altogether surprised by that, but that could be one of the surprising things that you take from it.
Yeah, I think as you'll see when we sort of show the results in a little while, we created a sort of a scoring method so people could actually understand where they were and actually plot progress. The original scoring was to go up to about 500 points, and we've now got the first website that scored over 4,000. So it's surprising how high a website can score and still operate effectively. But when you get to that sort of level, as you'll see, it has serious impacts on the website's operation, not just the privacy.
Right. Yeah, right. So, the website can kind of slug along because it's trying to collect or churn through so much information.
Well, I mean, in a real example, which we can show, it's sort of generating about 1,000 repeated cookies, which are generating about 2 gig of data every time somebody goes to their homepage. So that it's actually having a negative impact. You just couldn't use that much information. There's an error with the way it generates it could have serious impacts on their marketing capability because it's destroying all the value because you've got so much data you can't make use of any.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Very interesting. Let's talk about what people have to look forward to with the index over time. So I think it's cool that when you all are going to start running, the index monthly for this, that you'll be able to tell, you have like a color coded system that tells whether the company's getting better or worse. And so, I've seen some of the screenshots you guys showed me of some of the other, like some of the London index things that you guys have done. And some companies are really, taking it to heart and being able to improve, their position. I think it's cool because it pinpoints at a high level the issues that maybe companies need to look at more closely, right? And then if they can work to improve those things, that'll show up in the index, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Lance.
Oh yeah, I'd say in terms of, I suppose, the future of the index, one of the most important things really is organisations getting an early warning of when things go wrong or when things are not as they thought. I mean, we're completely independent of suppliers, providers. I mean, we've actually done indexes before in the past where we've ranked the actual data protection authorities themselves, and data protection authorities have failed and scored poorly on the index. And what's happened is they've changed their content management system, and the supplier didn't tell them what they were doing. And it could be quite embarrassing for a data protection authority that's issuing fines. Now, I'm not going to tell you which data protection authority it was for that question, but it wouldn't be the first time we've seen it. Put it that way. But yeah, I mean, it's real that you implement a new content management system that the vendor tells you everything's okay. A content management system. You put a consent management system and yet promises everything's going to be fine, and then it's not. And organisations are organizations are, in the main wanting, so I would say 30% of the world is it tends to be the retail and the media sector that want the data. 7% of the world are don't really want to reuse and misuse data. And they're trying to comply. But also, I think there's the thing about bringing in a way to independently rank sites, the way to bring in supplier accountability, and also some of the conversations we're having at country level is how you can automate policing of countries, because as we now as this market matures and the website's now the key operating function of a business. We've gone from bricks to clicks, as they say, and COVID has just accelerated this. There's a whole new, it's taken however many years to build bricks buildings, but we need to have the same level of compliance, respect, and transparency really in the market. We still won't. You can get the report privately.
Yes.
We're not answering those questions on air, that's for sure.
Yeah.
We are actually producing the rankings, the world rankings of the data protection authorities, shall we say? But we're not going to put we're going to put the overall. We're not going to put the overall position. It won't be the nth degree of information. Most do really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, it's really easy. Even ourselves, even when we've implemented, some of the Google product, you follow all the instructions and you read what happens. So you read up and you read what they say, and then you actually run it. And there's a thing. So if you're using YouTube and you don't want to set cookies, it advises you to use a domain called YouTube No Cookie. The clue would be in the name. One would think that there wouldn't be anything set. Yet what it's doing is, rather than setting standard cookies, it's setting a different type of object. And this is the challenge everybody faces. And we've done this for many years, and we've got quite thorough auditing capability. But no, the future of it is really about independence and being able to really look at where you are and get an early warning. I mean, the essence it's a service people can buy privately to benchmark all of their websites. And privacy is key to trust. Trust is key to a brand value, and organisations need an effective way to monitor what they're doing.
Just to add to that thing, something you alluded to there. I mean, we all know with websites, particularly any sizable website estate. I mean, the only constant is change, right? So keeping on top of this stuff is difficult. It is challenging, as Lawrence alluded to. New content being published every day, so it's trying to keep on top of this, particularly when third parties are involved, etc. Is going to be a challenge, and to have something to independently monitor it, I think is going to prove increasingly valuable, and hopefully the index and the risk score is something that will help with that.
A question that came up. Let's see. I think this is from Corey. He says, how will the elimination of things like third-party cookies and moving towards privacy budget impact your scoring?
Well, hopefully, it's in the chat today. I think there is Google sort of announcement about we're not going to block third-party cookies. There are quite a lot.
Oh, Lawrence, we may have lost you.
Lawrence froze up.
How's he going?
Well, I'm sure he'll come back. That's a great question because cookies aren't going to go away. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You froze up a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be going away. But also, there's not just cookies. You've got storage objects. You've got index objects. There's other technologies which are being used behind the scenes to replace them, shall we say? But also first-party cookies. If you're setting 150 cookies, when somebody visits your website, a first-party type, they are not. There's still the regulation about the use of essential cookies, and it's Google blocks some of them. Safari do something along the ways, but fortunately, the trust in those that sell the data and make money, those that monetize and make data, trusting them to not have access to data is something one would have to say, what's the future of the business models? if they're not collecting data in some way.
Right. And I just want to correct, Carrie is a she, by the way. She let me know that, who asked that question. Right. I agree. So cookies aren't going to go away. Well, cookies initially started to do things like track your settings when you go to a website. Like if you had a favorite page you want to go to, or there's, like you wanted to view in some certain way. So it sort of evolved into other things in terms of being able to track information in ways, like you said, that aren't essential. So I don't think that's going to go away. And I don't know. I think cookies almost in a legal sense has become kind of a word play, right? So even though cookies, third party cookies may be eliminated, it doesn't eliminate the tracking that happens, or it doesn't eliminate the data collection that's going to still occur. So I agree with that.
Well, yeah, we're also there's always been the fallacy that cookies are bad, etc. I mean, most cookies are fine, and a lot of cookies help you, operate a website more effectively. I mean, you're not going to block all third-party cookies because a lot of websites that use Stripe or use any payment gateway use cookies to do fraud detection and fraud management. Now, if it's the sort of the backlash of if a Google website can't take a payment through Stripe because it's blocked all the cookies because somebody hasn't turned them into first-party cookies, organizations are going to say, well, actually, our website doesn't work with Google in the future. It's that level of. I mean, admittedly, there are people, the sort of, I suppose, the technologists that really understand what you can do, and you can do some very, very naughty things with cookies. You can do incredibly intrusive things, we say, with cookies. But 99% of them are not intrinsically bad. 50% do good, we say, or are really part of a website operation. The argument about, and is analytical data, is that anonymous? No, you can do a lot. And as they found out with the sort of presidential election and sort of like, I think it was Facebook, where once you've got enough data, the anonymization of data is irrelevant. But cookies are intrinsic in how a lot of operations happen. Being able to identify and manage them will, unless we change the way digital operates and HTTP and request management is checked, it could be a long way before we actually don't rely on cookies. And if we rely on cookies, unless they're essential, consent has to be given, really.
That's right. Exactly. Absolutely. Well, I've made you the host, Lawrence. So if you want, if you want a preview or a demo, anything, feel free.
Yeah. So should we just do should we do a walkthrough of sort of the the index? Well, not the example. This is the live index, and I think Debbie's going to send out a link. Debbie's going to send a link to this afterwards. Anyway, aren't you? Everybody will get a link to this and post it, etc.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm recording this session, so I will post it, and I'll make sure that Lawrence and Rob have a copy of it as well.
Okay. Yeah. So what we do is we have scanning technology that goes to websites, and it goes to lots of websites simultaneously. So going to 50, 500, 5,000 websites, the sort of scale we run to. I mean, we're looking at sort of how you police countries, so how we can look at 2 to 5 million websites to benchmark them. And what we do is we'll go to a website. We look at actually all of the objects and the tracking technologies that are being set before any consent's been given. Now, there is an allowance for essential cookies cookie management systems are essential, as are load balancing. So it takes that sort of thing into account. And then what it's doing is once it's gone to the website, it's looked at the objects that are being set, say, before any consent's been given. And then based on the objects that are set, it'll create a score. And the score is intelligent, whereby if you've just got a few cookies which are doing load balancing, consent management, and you score 5 out of 10, you score a total of 5, you'll be green. We've created a green, go from green to red in terms of how we report. And this is the record this month where GoDaddy scored over 4,000. But when you talk about the value of an index, when you look at the cookies that are being set here, you can clearly see there's an error in the way their pages are generating cookies, and it's generating thousands of cookies on a page, which could cause considerable impact on performance as well. But what it's doing, it's looking at the cookies, and then it's looking at the sort of who actually is the ultimate data recipient. So if you've got DoubleClick, if you've got YouTube, if you've got Google, those will score higher than if you've got you've got a Facebook cookie and you've got a Twitter cookie, because it's looking at really what is so the score is really about what is the impact on privacy. So you've got the name of the organization, the domain, you've got the overall score here, and then what we've got is the change. So there's something happened. So what we can, so this is what we're talking about, sort of an early warning. So the likes of this website here, that the change was nearly 4,000. There's only 100. It did score 100 before, and now it scores, except for this sort of level here, which would indicate something's gone wrong. And then how you can track over time. So it used to be orange, and then went to red. There's a website, Dollar Tree here. They look like they used to score. They used to be green, and now they score red. We're also building in the technology to interact with the actual consent management platform. So we've got the first 3 or 4 implemented. OneTrust is the most prevalent and the most obvious on websites. I mean, the Dollar Tree one is an actual website where we had a look at it to just check it, and they've implemented a consent management platform. But the challenge is the consent management platform doesn't seem to be displaying properly. So it's a sort of a double whammy really of a problem. So you've got that, and with this you can rank the website, so you can look at who scores the best. And Alphabet, Google scores, is in the sort of top in terms of the scoring. Now, I know people talk about Google as a sort of the big data collection thing, etc. But what we bizarrely find is because we also do accessibility auditing at sort of various levels, and Alphabet is because we rank the Fortune and the sort of NASDAQ as well, and Alphabet is probably one of the best sites for accessibility as well. So in terms of digital capability, you sort of have to point to Google leading, but yeah, so you can rank it in any way, or you can search. You can also click here, so you can click on here, and then that will take you into the detail of how the score's calculated. So we've got what is the overall score. To say there's an allowance. Cookies are used by websites, and then as you go through, we originally thought the scale would be 100, then we thought the scale was 500. Etc. Now this is the number of sort of cookies that are looking at it. You then get a breakdown of all the domains which are setting, and then what type of things. So the cookies. So so all of these traditionally are the third-party cookies, but then there's the web storage objects in the database. So that's the sort of top level. And then what you can do is click into the detail. So you can see exactly what is the cookie in use. You can open it up and say, well, I want to see the DoubleClick. So I want to see the name of the cookie, the journey the cookie goes on, where the data is going to, how long the cookie lasts, and then the size of the object. Oh, really? That is so in terms of a very sort of brief walkthrough of what we do and the index. A quick look at it. Any over to yourselves? So sort of questions, Debbie? Any thoughts, comments?
Well, as I said, I really like it because it does give you a high level view of things instead of you having to dig for it, right? So being able to just go in and take a look at that about how the websites are operating, I think is really helpful. But then too, I just want to mention to people that some companies that you deal with, obviously, Lawrence, have lots of different websites. So obviously, if you want to go in independently and search for different websites, just know that, these some of these big companies have many different websites. So we're just, taking their main domains and looking at them. I think it's extremely helpful, especially if let's say you're working with a company, you want to get just a really quick snapshot of where they are in terms of their public facing, website, being able to pop their information in and get some high level insights really quickly is very, very helpful, I think. So
you can go onto the website. I think Debbie shared the link, but you can go onto the website, our website here, type in any web address right here, Then it'll run the site through. Takes a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And runs it through. So you had a question there about, is it meaningful to Alphabet to point to AB? Yeah, right. Yeah. So the reason, yeah, when we do an index, we're very specific in terms of the constituents and the indexes and the naming of the index. There are a lot. Yeah, the Google's got quite a few names, quite a few companies, but their main corporate entity is abc.xyz, which is their sort of corporate website. We try to do the same type of website, should we say? So what's listed as the main website? So if you were to do a lookup on sort of Forbes, what would be the main corporate website for each of the entities? Hence, that's why we do abc.xyz, no domain, that rather than doing google.com.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it's probably worth saying again, just sort of repeating there. So that index you see obviously is all for the main sites for those corporate bodies. But as you rightly point out, Debbie, you know, there could be an organization with 10, 50, 100, 1,000, 10,000 domains or whatever. So we can, you know, also build indexes for, you know, one organization's sites or any number of sites or combination of sites. So that's, you know, we find that you know, companies find that really useful as well, obviously, because they can then look at the sites that are performing the best and then the worst, and look where they can focus their attention if they want to take remedial type action. So that's by building your own privacy index is something that we can help with too.
Yeah, it's sort of a benchmark or scorecard. It's meant to be kind of a living, you know, checkpoint, right? So
Yeah.
you want to be able to see over time how these things improve or get worse, and then, you know, hopefully companies who see it that want to improve, they'll use this as a tool for where to pinpoint, you know, their efforts. I think it's only going to accelerate now because people, you know, as we see the regulations, they're really kind of cracking down on kind of third party data transfer, you know, and with looking at cookies, and, you know, we're seeing, you know, Google and Apple kind of moving away from systems or ways that uh, identify individuals too closely, right? So especially for advertising, you know, unless the person gives their consent, they want to make that data collection a little bit more general, and you know, and they're doing it in groups, right, like cohorts and things like that, because, you know, I think it's important that individuals have more control over their data and the data that they give over. So companies that are able to have trust, have consumers trust them, will give data to those companies. So companies, in my view, that have first party cookies where you've already consented to that, they'll have kind of the most valuable data. What are your thoughts?
Well,
Oh yeah, I mean,
go Lawrence.
Rob, I was going to say, I think, yeah, I mean, without say if you think of data as the sort of next electricity, or sort of the thing that powers organizations in the future, if organizations misuse that, start to get lots of complaints about misuse of data, it's a regulatory area that can only grow and will probably grow quite quickly. But I think the sort of, in terms of the regulation, so we work with a number of the sort of regulations around the world. It will probably get draconian, their sort of powers about what they can do. I mean, one of them we're talking to about the concept of a 3-strike rule. So the first time, you know, you'll get a polite warning when you get it wrong the first time. Second time, you might get a fine, shall we say. Then the third time is a case of appearing, and if you haven't got the justification to operate and you can't demonstrate that you're going to improve, they're looking at even the power to remove a domain. But they you know, a $10 million, $50 million fine to Facebook or Google or etc. It's, I wouldn't say pocket change, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's an insignificant, but it's not a significant. It doesn't have a significant impact on them. And we don't have the concept of a global regulator.
Right.
And these organizations are operating globally. Was a
Yeah.
question about Facebook, which we'll cover in a moment if you want.
Yeah. I saw that as well. Go for it. You go first and I'll chime in.
Yeah. So, should we get Carrie on? Carrie, could you just join the panel? Asking all the questions. Welcome.
Good questions.
No,
good questions.
No. Well, I think there is a way to score very low on the system. You know, this isn't so we can't give legal advice, we can't give legal opinion, etc. But it's very easy to sort of not collect cookies on the very front of your website. But I think with something like Facebook, let's say they're relatively clever in terms of how they collect data. So they're collecting data using everybody else's website, because you've got the Facebook buttons that say Facebook features, which can collect data and set cookies, but it doesn't feature on Facebook's website. And also, I think the majority of data, I don't know, once again, I don't know specifically, but I'd suggest that the majority of data that Facebook collect is after people log in. When we're doing the index, we're not logging into a website. We're only looking at the very, very front of what's set without consent. Because I don't know, I've not, one of the few people who's probably not used Facebook much, but I don't have a Facebook name user account. And I would suggest that really when you log into Facebook, or you actually, you have an account on Facebook, the terms and conditions will be quite strict in terms of how much data, what they can do. And their argument will be, well, they've got consent after you log in. So they can afford to store low, they can afford to, on the very front end, not raise red flags to regulators, should we say?
Yeah.
Is that okay, Kerry?
Yeah. So yeah, I think sometimes right. So this tool really is looking at the public facing website, not like your account or, so this, again, Facebook is a little bit different because they're social media things. So when you log in, you get your own account, you get an ID, and in order to use it, you have to consent to a ton of things. So a lot of it is data that you've consented to. Unfortunately, my opinion about this, especially with free services, they can get you to consent to almost anything. So the sky is the limit in terms of consent. So in exchange for a free service, you consent to a ton of things that you probably would not have consented to if you use the paid service. I'll put it that way. Because there are different laws about paid services, and in terms of being able to quantify, what the true value is of, the service that you're giving. But in a free service, there really is very, the sky is the limit. So I'd like to tell people, you can't sell your organs, but that's about it. So you can consent to almost anything with a free service that you use.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Debbie. I think as well, I think it's worth pointing out, the index and the scores that we put out there are there to help people and guide them on their road to compliance. And the fact that obviously Facebook's is slightly different, but I've come across organizations where their headline, their corporate site, their .com site has no cookies, but as soon as you go onto any of their satellite sites or any of the other domains, the thousands and thousands and thousands, etc. We're not here, and the index is not about trying to to track those people down. We're really, the index is about people who we can quickly early warning sign of risk, etc., and are looking to manage that risk. And there'll always be people, there'll always be sites and ways. I'm not saying in this case that is the case, but I'm just saying but I think we can all see from the so some of the lawsuits that are out there, I think Facebook is one that features fairly heavily in some of the litigation that we're seeing. So yeah, they're certainly not immune from this.
Right. Post account setup stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So, well, we're getting close to the end here. So do you all have any parting thoughts that you like to say? I did put in the chat the link to my website, where you can look at the privacy risk index. the Fortune 1000, and then also the link to Privacy and Cookies Rethink Privacy Index, where you can use it for any company domain. So what do you guys like to say?
Well, for myself, thank you. Well, if there's any other questions, do let us know. I mean, via Debbie's got our details. Really, no, thanks. Hopefully it's useful. Over to you, Rob.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this has been fantastic. I want to thank Debbie again for having us on. I mean, this has been a great way for us. I mean, the index is about awareness at the end of the day, and because I'm sure when people and organisations become aware of the issues, then they're gonna start tackling them. And that's going to be good. That's going to be good for everyone. So yeah, I want to thank Debbie for the opportunity, and I hope it's started. And we're obviously going to run these regularly, these index regularly. It's the start of a more kind of education about what's happening out there, with probably unbeknownst to us most of the time.
Yeah, I definitely want to do it again, especially to see a change difference. What's changed month to month to certain companies, and what are kind of the most surprising, changes, or the most drastic changes, whether they be good or bad in this. And then, again, as the world is changing around their thoughts about third-party cookies, we're probably going to see less of those. Obviously, there are going to be different ways of tracking. But then I think we're going to start to see companies trying to get more first-party cookies. So things where people are consenting to those cookies. I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I think I mean, hopefully, I mean, say this level of reporting and sort of auditing has never really been seen before. And, it's not a sort of reason to point fingers. It's really, I think, in the main, most people want to respect privacy. Hopefully, most people want to respect privacy. Most, they want to uphold their sort of social responsibility, but also they understand the importance of privacy and transparency and data protection, not from just being sued by the regulator, but like I say, just in general good behaviour. Now it's easy. It's much easier to see where you are. We're not affiliated to any consent management platform, any privacy company, any regulator. It's completely independent. And as you see from that list with GoDaddy, there's something seriously gone wrong with their website, and it may actually be something that might help them fix it. But hopefully, let's see what the changes are next month, and then hopefully see more people next month.
Yeah. That would be great. That would be great. Well, thank you. Thank you for this. This has, been very illuminating. It's helped me a lot. I think companies, when they're dealing with privacy, that I think their website is kind of like your digital storefront, correct? So being able to assess that is probably kind of the low hanging fruit. Though to me, those are the things that companies can impact pretty quickly, I would say. Once they know what the problem is and what the risk is. But obviously, there are other back office things that companies need to work on. But I think being able to get this straightened out is really important, and it is a good tool for individuals. So if there are companies that you want to do business with, you want to sort of know, are they the type of company that respects privacy? And then for companies, this may be a good scorecard for you and your organization. So this may point to areas that you may want to improve or think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, excellent. I guess we'll end here. This is great. Thank you all for being able to attend this session. And again, we made a recording, so we'll keep a copy of this and be able to pull it out. And I think that anyone who signed up will get a link to this as well. So excellent.
Thank you, everyone.